So, Councillor Robert Alden, you were a frustrated man this week.
Hi, yeah, we had the latest council meeting this week, and for a long time we've been trying to get Birmingham City Council to discuss some of the big issues that have been happening in the city, but there's just been a stonewall where they haven't wanted to discuss them.
You said in a statement that you gave to our local democracy reporters that we published the news on Switch Radio that you are concerned that it's only what you're calling small projects that are allowed to be discussed or scrutinised.
Well, I think the concern of what happened this week at the council meeting is we just found out a list of all the decisions that the council has taken during the COVID emergency. 100% of those decisions were taken by officers, not elected members. 61% of decisions were taken with no cabinet briefing, and 57% of key decisions were taken without consulting the leader in the cabinet. And what that means is more than 400 million was spent by Birmingham City Council without any elected member discussion. And then at this week's council meeting, instead of just discussing those decisions and those very serious things that are impacting on the health and the future of people in our city, we discussed whether or not the council should join the cooperative councils network at a cost of £8,000.
What would constitute a large project for you then?
Well, there's many things which the council have refused to discuss. If you look at the fact they wouldn't discuss the bin dispute in the council chamber, you look at the Tysley incinerator extension, that's got to be extended, hugely controversial, council won't discuss that. And indeed, when the council did let a private meeting take place of that, they tried to make councillors sign a non-disclosure agreement so that they wouldn't leak anything that was in that meeting to the public. This attempt to gag councillors and ensure the public don't know what's being spent with their money, I think is just totally unacceptable in a democracy.
Would you consider yourself, and this is a leading question, but would you consider yourself to be a glass half empty person?
Well, I think in life, I'm the eternal optimist, and all my friends would say I'm an optimist. What I found, though, is from experience on Birmingham City Council, with the Labour administration, you are a pessimist because whenever you think they're finally opening up and being honest, you realise they're still hiding the truth from the residents of our city.
The reason I asked that question is for those that can see the video of this right now, we can see Buddha just over your shoulder, which is obviously a lot of inner peace and spiritualization. You know, people could put that your way. But the main focus of the question was in the response to your statement this week from the leader of the council, Ian Ward, who said it's a glass half empty statement.
Well, indeed, it's incredibly sad that when put to the leader, the fact that he hadn't, as leader of the council, taken any involvement in making the decisions that are going to save or not people's lives in this city during the COVID response. All he could say in response was, well, that's a half glass empty. If it takes someone being a little bit pessimistic to shake this administration into realizing that if they are going to be in charge of the city, they actually have to be responsible and lead, not sit there and hide behind officers. Well, that's what we have to do to shake them into the reality of if you're meant to be in charge of this city, you're meant to lead from the front, not follow from behind.
This may not be widely known, but there is an LGA governance report that has been received into the council in December, following a peer review visit that took place in September. This one is, I'm told, a suite of peer reviews that was due to be presented at Cabinet Committee in April this year, but was postponed due to the pandemic. It's now been published on the City Council website and is scheduled for September's Cabinet. And a lot of the recommendations on the LGA were about scrutiny. Mm-hmm. And the way a lot of things that we've just talked about should happen. Do you think, and it would be interesting to get a response on this, we tried to get a response, but was unforthcoming from the other side. Do you think the opportunity was taken this week to just essentially bounce everything through and then wait for recommendations to be implemented later on?
Well, I think it's worse than that, because what we found out 2 weeks ago was, despite that scrutiny report not having been published, and it was only published 2 days ago, the administration tried to take a report through the Governance Scrutiny Committee that actually weakened the scrutiny powers, claiming that that was off the back of recommendations that had been in that governance review. Now that governance review has been published, it's very clear that none of the recommendations the council were wanting to impose upon scrutiny are within the spirit of what this governance report was talking about. And this is just the latest example of the Labour administration in Birmingham being upset by anything that looks into the failings of them and therefore tries to silence scrutiny instead of actually doing the easiest way of solving it, which is just improving the services for our city, because actually residents deserve better services. And instead of trying to silence the opposition for highlighting the failures, just don't make mistakes.
For the attempt, or for the sake of balance, we did attempt to get a Labour cabinet member onto the programme. It would have been nice to have actually had a debate, and I could have just chaired a debate between the two of you, but that was none coming, and then a statement was given to me late yesterday by the press office. What picture does that paint to the citizens of Birmingham, really, that they weren't willing to come on and have this, not necessarily a debate, but cross questioning from people like myself?
Well, I think it really follows on from the council meeting, and it follows on from scrutiny where they've tried to weaken Cllr. They're just taking the city of Birmingham for granted. They feel they've been elected to run the city. They're happy to sit there, not make any decisions, leave it to officers, take the money without any responsibility, and then hide when the press try to interrogate them.
We could run a list of the big issues that are going on, that have been going on for quite a long time in Birmingham. You mentioned before, bin collections is something that isn't going to go away anytime soon. That's been going on for a long time. The Tyseley incinerator, that's not something we have actually talked about on this programme, but it is a big problem. And for a Labour-led council, the local Labour MPs against it, for example. So there's an issue for scrutiny there. There's the John Lewis issue, which we talked about on the show last week. We didn't necessarily mention a row that was building up about the clean air zone. There's members of on the Conservative side who are blaming the clean air zone for the closure of John Lewis, which is refuted on the Labour side. Naturally, can I just get your thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, what we've seen since Labour announced they were going to introduce a travel tax on private vehicles going into the city centre is it's just the latest in a series of anti-business measures that when a company is weighing up all of the things, it's not going to be the only reason. COVID's clearly going to have had an impact. But when they're weighing up all of the things and they make a decision, you can see what they chose. Solihull's John Lewis isn't going anywhere. 5 miles up the road, Birmingham's John Lewis, the creme de la creme of John Lewis's, if you like, in the flagship store, that's closing. And it's quite clear if customers, and John Lewis sells big ticket items, things like TVs and furniture, people generally need to take them in a car to take them home. If people can't drive to the store anymore to collect them, then that store doesn't have a future, does it? And what we really desperately need in Birmingham is a council that's going to be pro-jobs, which means supporting the businesses in our city, so that we can make sure out of the COVID recession, we get a really strong recovery here in Birmingham.
Do you worry about the Commonwealth Games?
Well, you can only have to look at the answers at every council meeting to see that the deadlines are going further and further back. They're not meeting them. It's over budget. One of the other things I raised at the council meeting that they wouldn't discuss was the National Express bus depot. They bought that recently, 8 times more than they budgeted for. They refused to have a cabinet report for it, and they refused to allow a call-in of that decision. And then it transpired, nothing needs to happen to that building before the Commonwealth Games. So they bought it 2 years before it's needed for 8 times the budget to use it for 11 days of sport. That's just not sensible use of taxpayers' money.
So we're talking about going back to what we just talked about there with John Lewis. Now you're talking about the National Express bus depot. That's 2 entry points into Birmingham, which, from a PR point of view, that when the whole world is going to be coming here within 2 years, that's not good, surely.
Absolutely not. And this thing, the Commonwealth Games is a huge opportunity for our city, but we have to get it right. When you have the world's media watching Birmingham, we need to be making sure we're showing why people should relocate to Birmingham, not showing the bad sides, which would make people not want to invest here.
And just before we let you go, when we spoke on the show a few weeks ago, your concern over the pub in Erdington,
Cross Keys.
The Cross Keys. What's the latest on that, please?
So there hasn't been a decision yet on that in planning, so that's still being considered by the planning department, and obviously we're waiting to hear from planning what the final outcome is. Obviously ourselves and residents still really concerned, and we're doing all we can to try and put the case to planning to make sure that they realise that there are much better options for the pub than the conversion into a hostel.
Cllr Robert Alden, thank you.
Thank you.